Welcome back to Impact Influence, the podcast where we explore the conversations, the skills, and the mindsets that shape how we show up for ourselves and for others. Today's guest is Saira Lusby. She's a senior HR leader with years of experience coaching executives and teams through change, leadership, challenges, and personal transformation. In this episode, we explore why the best performers aren't just technically great, they're emotionally intelligent. We'll talk about emotional management, how to respond instead of react, and why relationships, not resumes, actually drive long term success. If you've ever found yourself triggered, frustrated, or uncertain about how to handle tough conversations, this episode is going to help you pause, reflect, and grow. Enjoy the episode. Saira Lusby, how are you today?
I am fantastic. Thank you, Sunny Singh.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Sarah, curious question. You're in the field of people development, being an HR business partner for years. What do you kind of observe behaviors and ways that your high performers tend to do more of? What is it that they do more of to get their better results as you observe it?
That's a really fantastic question. Would say definitely mindset. So actually, I would say relational. It's all kind of very much centered around relational stuff. The high performers that I've seen are really good with managing relationships. And I don't mean managing up. I mean managing their relationships and managing themselves. They're both emotionally. I think management of self is around emotional management. Being a little bit more. I think those same high performers were able to ground themselves as needed. So I think that minimizes the reactivity because often I guess things go out of one's control or decisions might get made that they may not agree with. I'd say high performers that I've seen take pause before they actually respond to things. So that might be a little bit with the reactivity kind of piece and the EQ bit. And the other thing that I would say I've seen high performers do, and I must have been inspired by it as well, um, is very much to be kind and collaborative. So I feel like the reason is not the reason. I think longer, more prosperous careers, from what I've seen, didn't come about in or often translate into opportunities, particularly in times where there might be uncertainty or instability. And those networks are really important. And I'll just kind of give one example that's popping into my mind. This MD that I'd worked for some years ago, in the healthcare industry, and he was so relationally. So he was actually from a sales background, pharma sales actually. That was how he'd started his career, and then he was the MD of this organization, and he just used to network all the time. But he saw it as part of his role. He did work for one of the larger kind of farmers some years ago, many years ago, and I believe that they had really upskilled their people around that, their talent around that type of stuff. So he would always be out there networking. So whether it was opportunity for him, bringing people into the organization to make himself and the organization more successful, he really counted on those relationships. So I think he invested in those relationships as well. So I would say outside of technical aptitude, I think it comes to relationships and emotional management, EQ.
Just on that topic of relationship networking, I'd imagine charisma is kind of behind that as well. Your interpersonal skills, knowing who you are, knowing the other person, how to kind of build that bridge between yourself and the other person. Not everyone's kind of has that as an innate skill, right? If you tend to be high on detail and maybe or you're an introverted feeler, perhaps you aren't as confident in getting yourself out there. How do you kind of coach those sorts of people, which obviously they've got skills in different areas of the business. They may be fantastic at the detail, they know their numbers, fantastic with strategy. However, if it's a networking thing or a relationship building thing, they may not have the expertise. How do you kind of coach that in those sorts of individuals?
Sorry, I think it's actually, I feel that we may um, kind of imagine networking to be so much more socially driven, perhaps, or require a social skill than what it might need to. And I guess from that perspective, it can be in your. So if how I would coach that to answer your question would be if there was somebody that was a little bit more on the introverted side, and perhaps even like technically strong or technically sound, a little bit, let's say, shy, like they don't like to go out to the social gatherings, like the work function so much, don't like to meet people that they don't know so much. I think the networking comes equally,
Mhm.
by way of seeing somebody, I'll just kind of think of maybe 4 examples that somebody could do or that I might encourage someone to do in that circumstance. I would say identify people that they've seen other leaders in the business, or that they've admired, maybe a peer that's able to who represent something or reflect something that they would like to learn. And I would say just reach out. Usually people are pretty open. If you're saying, "Oh, I just really want to learn from you," I'd say just drop them an email and go, "Hey, I saw you do this and I liked it. I was inspired. I feel a bit uncomfortable reaching out to you. I was just wondering if you might have like 5 or 10 minutes for a coffee or something." I think first and foremost, my encouragement would be just to make time for it. And it can come in all forms. And then I think slowly you could broaden out. I feel like sometimes we perceive that networking to be a leader like 3 rungs up and out and or in a different organization. So it's a real cold call potentially that they have to make. And there's a lot of putting oneself out there because there's a personal investment to that or to the motivation behind it. So I would say networking can come by way of even reaching out to a peer in another organization or somebody maintaining networks when somebody has left the organization that
Yeah.
you have a relationship with. And the way that I've seen that come to fruition. So I said I think I'd give 5 examples. I might just try to knock those out.
Yeah.
So I'd say people in your organization who are in same role as people in organization that you've seen present or something, a leader maybe in a different part of the business, someone that you've seen or know of who is making some kind of difference in the field that you're either interested in or in. So you could just seek out a little bit more information, a little bit more risky potentially, but a competitor where you've heard of someone or um, that you're aware of somebody who's been successful or you've read about, or you've seen an article perhaps, something that someone's doing in an organization that's really good. So you can just get to understand a little bit more of your market. So I'd say that's another space. And the final one that I would add there is someone that has left your organization, maintaining contact and periodically catching up with them, whether it's a check-in call to see how they're going, because you just never know. And where I've seen it come to fruition and be really fortuitous outside of that genuine, connection is when organizations are going through massive change. Often I've seen I'll say not even high performers. I've seen people forge their own career or make a position for themselves really organically because they've got those networks or they've heard of something. They were able, it's not just approaching someone cold and going, "Hey, I need your help to find a job."
Yeah.
It comes with something. And the other place is that when there are opportunities, we say contact someone on LinkedIn. If you know someone in an organization, I'd say in those circumstances as well, you might hear of other opportunities in other organizations because of that.
Yeah. Interesting. Because a couple of points, if I can just build upon and perhaps ask you questions. The idea of connecting out on LinkedIn and other social functions slash organizations where you are proactive in a time whereby you don't need them. I think the times where you do need them, if you've already connected to them and you've had a bit of an interaction, it doesn't sound like you're in it for something, for yourself.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more platonic. It's two friends coming together and either the bond, the connection has already been established. So I think that's a very, very important thing to say. It's like when you call someone out of the blue after 20 years and say, "Hey, can I borrow that lawnmower of yours because I really need to cut my grass?" But it's like going, "Dude, what happened to the last 20 years? We haven't even spoken. You're going to ask me this question." So I think that's a really valid one. I do have a query. Stepping back a little bit, this does imply that the person's got a degree of self-awareness that where their gaps might be. So if I know that my gaps might be presenting or analyzing or strategy, I've got to probably have a good long hard think about myself and understand where my pros are, where my cons are, and maybe how I can leverage my pros but develop my cons. So then I go to the right person to help me address those cons. So I guess it does depend and hinge on a degree of self-awareness in terms of what you need more of. Kind of fair to say, right?
Yeah, I'd say fair to say, definitely. And I
Yeah.
don't think that we give enough time. When I say we, I think in organizations that I've worked, we as a people function encourage there to be a development plan as well as the performance, the KPIs, so the objectives. And the development plan often, by way of execution, is a nice to have. And people don't necessarily find the time, make the time, feel they are worthy of the time to do those development plans and not for those kind of linear kind of thought processes.
Mhm.
It just doesn't get the weight, I guess, because it's not something that we're necessarily going to get recognized for financially. However, for us to continue to grow in such ever changing environments, that development plan is so vitally important. And often, when there are frameworks in place, they'll have prompting kind of questions. I could just encourage, I could never encourage people enough to just take that time, 5 minutes, even I'd say kind of ideally every quarter at a minimum, but every month, if there was like that space, just to think about what I'm doing, what I'm loving, what I want to do more of, what I want to do less of. I mean, ideally, that goes into that development plan. So then it does create that opportunity for you to act on it. And again, I would say the networking doesn't even have to be so much around that. If that is somebody that's feeling that they don't know what they want to develop, and so they don't know how they want to tap into their networks from that perspective, I would say the networks might just be just honestly check in. How are you going? I want to know more about what you're doing, what your role is, what your company is. Just that. And people don't get an opportunity, I think, sometimes to talk about what they're doing enough, and they like that. They appreciate it. I don't know that I've come across a person who's gone, I don't have time to sit with you for 5 minutes, especially because you want to know more about me. So, yeah, I think if you felt comfortable and you knew what there was, again, to that authenticity that you mentioned, if you authentically know that there's a spot that you want to tap into somebody else's space for your development needs, like, yeah, by all means, I'd encourage someone to go down that path and incite that conversation. But if it's just networking, it's really just broadening out who you know from a career perspective.
What's growth to you?
What's growth to me? Honestly, growth for me is just being the best person I can be and constantly evolving towards that best practice person. And for me, that comes in by way of, small things like not being super reactive or just, better and better and better. And observing like those times when I might say more than I wanted to say and I hadn't thought about it, and I might have, not even hurt someone's feelings blatantly, but I just didn't look back at my day and feel extremely proud of myself, or I felt like I could have done something different or better. So I think for me that's growth, like when I get closer to that best practice person.
You mentioned two things twice, which is quite interesting. Um, Reacting versus responding. What's the difference?
I just heard someone talking about this on the weekend actually. So reacting, not responding. So for me, I think the difference is take that time, that gap between something occurring and how I might show up to that moment versus taking pause, albeit, 1 to 3 seconds or longer, and reacting or showing up to that moment with intent.
Yeah, interesting. I guess sometimes you can have that amygdala hijack where you just absolutely lose your mind over something. And it could be really trivial. It could be something big. I don't know, right? But you just lose it altogether. And then 5 minutes later, you're thinking to yourself, why did I react that way? That was definitely a reaction and not a response. And you go, why? You know? No, please.
I find myself doing that for me, I feel like it's coming into more and more a sense of not having control. Or so it comes for me, it shows up for me around two things: expectation on how another person might behave and control over how that person might behave. And having teenage kids who have always been and still are, they're awesome kids. They're at a point where they're making choices themselves and they might not just do everything I want exactly how I want it. And a couple of times I've found myself the amygdala hijack where I've gone, use perhaps shame. Well, you're so selfish then for not doing what I want you to do. And fortunately, like we're really open with each other and I'm so aware of it and I like myself calm. I feel more proud of myself when I'm calm.
Yeah.
So I've been able to recognize it and call it out, but at a later point, that's kind of where it shows up. And I think even from a work context or perspective, where I've seen it show up for a lot of people, including myself, is
Yeah.
when somebody makes a decision
Yeah.
that I don't agree with, whether that's job change or responsibility shift, whatever it might be. Uh, and I'm not necessarily feeling like I'm in control of that, or I've kind of perceived that of others.
How do you navigate the conversations, the self-talk, and the actions of people when you've got this misalignment in that sort of scenario?
Yeah. So one thing I've learned to do over my years is exactly that responding, not reacting thing, but especially in the workplace. So this is my personal lens. There's no right or wrong. I'm not representing anyone or company when I say it, but where I've landed is there's not a place for emotions in a workplace, ideally. I mean, we can be happy and and optimistic. So I believe it's good to be happy and try to be optimistic anyways. And there is a place for our, as human beings, a place for our, you know, negative emotions because we're human. In the workplace and corporate space, I don't see necessarily that there is always a space for that unless it's with that EQ space, like a bit of control and management, not as a reaction. I think what I've seen, and even where I've kind of how I've evolved and learned from a career perspective, those times where I have just said exactly what I think and I have had emotion that attaches itself to that response or reaction, it hasn't served me so great. Like at the end of the day, like I'm paid to do a job. I'm reporting into somebody who's got a kind of more higher level view or more a holistic view to what I might see. And I have to trust that. And I'm there for somebody else. Like I'm paid to do something and I may not always agree to what I have to do as long as it doesn't cut into my ethics and integrity and values. And I think that there was a maturity for me in recognizing that I'm paid to do something and I've got to do it. So to answer your question, sorry to come to that, I'd say it's hard. It's not easy because we put our person into our jobs, so many of us, and then to do something that doesn't sit with what I think is the right thing to do can be tricky. So I think it's being kind to oneself. So just recognizing that, yeah, I actually don't agree. I think it's important to speak up. I think it's important to speak up in a respectful and clear manner. And often if I don't know what I want to say, but I know I
Mm.
don't feel settled about something. So if we got, sorry, I won't give an example, but so what I would probably do in that instance is, first of all, you could probably see it on my face. I don't have a poker face generally. So my manager or whomever is in that room probably might see that I'm not 100% embracing or all embracing of it. But I would just process it. And then I'd probably say, yeah, I'm not actually so sure. So what I've learned is to articulate, to try to get a bit of an understanding of how I'm feeling. I just have, and it's a little bit, maybe it's not for everybody. I just keep something. I got told one time many years ago, keep a stone or keep something that you
Mhm.
feel that grounds you, makes you feel just calm or brings yourself back to where you're at instead of getting caught up in your angst or emotion.
Yeah,
So I tend to have that nearby, whether it's in my pocket if I go in the office
yeah,
or next to me. So I just become a bit more present and then I articulate what I'm thinking. So that might be, yeah, I'm not sure if this is such a great idea sold entirely, but I hear you and let me just take it away. I tend to just write just to get clarity. My mind sometimes can just be so full of like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
if I don't agree, especially it gets quite, as I take things quite personally and I throw my person in. So I just get that clarity myself. For me, again, that comes through writing. And then I'll go, okay, like where am I at? And I tend to the best of my ability, not communicate with, especially at work. I tend to not communicate stuff if I feel emotional about it. I'll try really hard to make sure that I'm in a state. It's more effective that way. You get more better credibility. I think if you can get dismissed if a person's too emotional and not able to convey what their points of view are. So I think it's a kind of better outcome for all. And then the other person feels respected in that conversation. And then I always try to find from whatever's put forth to me, if I don't entirely agree, I try to understand why I don't agree and find that middle ground. So come with a solutions mindset. I worked at this awesome FMCG company many, many years ago when I first came into HR. And my director there said, I'm sorry, my puppy's gone. My director at the time had said, I was like, well, this is what's wrong. And he said, Sarah, come to me with a solution. Don't come to me with the
yeah,
problem.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I've taken that
That's
from
well
the
said.
start of my career. So I've done it ever since. I believe in being very solutions oriented. And often my solutions don't come to fruition as long as I got heard for the most part. I'm happy. And then I'll just kind of get on with it and swallow my pride. That's something else I've really had to learn.
So you owe it to you, not only yourself, but you owe it to the organization and those people around you to be truthful and honest. As you said, in the right context and be respectful, but to make it like a measured suggestion or your own input in a measured fashion, whereby you are kind of distancing emotion from it. Emotion can do all sorts of wonderful things and sometimes some not wonderful things, as you know, you very rightly said. But you do owe it you owe it to those people around you to be honest because you're saying something which is in the best interest of the company, right? It's in the best interest of the business and you got to do what's right for the business. And that could be hard sometimes. It could be really hard. it may involve really difficult conversations, which I'd imagine you're no stranger to. How do you navigate difficult conversations? What's what's do you have any overarching principles or methodologies that you kind of approach?
Yeah, so I have had a lot of difficult conversations or tried to coach leaders to the best of my ability and having those. And I think where I've landed now is 2 things probably. Well, I'd say 3 actually. Openness, like, I am pretty open anyway, so I don't take that for granted. I have had feedback from peers lots of times that, it's just something that doesn't come, it comes easy to me, lots of things don't. So I recognize that as a strength, but still I feel like that's a strength worth tapping in, trying to learn as much as is possible, or trying to see the value in being open. um, and by openness, I mean try to give as much information as you possibly can in that situation. So whether it be from my perspective, like whether it be a restructure or whether it be the rationale why, and being open to people's response, I think being empathetic. So when I say open, I don't just mean open by way of what I'm sharing, but open to hearing what the other person has to say. Again, just recognizing that we each get value from being heard. It's kind of, I feel like all we want to one of the things that we all want. We want to be heard, we want our feelings to be respected. If not agreed upon, that's fine. But just, hear me.
And understood. You want to be understood. You hear me and understand me. You may not agree with me, as you said, but just at least you
Yeah.
understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah. And then I'd say the other thing is humanity. So if I look back to when I first came into my field and did my first few, had my facilitated my first few redundancy conversations, now I always do it with a leader. I can't think of a time where I've had to do it on my own. One of my early career jobs, I was kind of, like George Clooney at the time, flying around. And I thought it was just really glamorous, to be honest. I mean, I was young and naive at the time. I didn't really understand so much of what I understand now about job change in that circumstance. And I never was never cruel about it, but I think empathy is something that I've really been kind of forced to understand and learn because people have shared their experiences or their emotional experience when they're confronted with that situation. And also having, responsibility myself. Now I probably place a lot more credence on it than what, and not even financial. I like being part of something. I have much more of an appreciation for the place I play in a team and, my routine or all those things where I was a kind of young lass into HR, I didn't necessarily value it as much. So, hearing people's experience when they've been forced with have had change forced upon them has just made me become more empathetic. And the other thing I've probably from difficult conversations and not from a redundancy perspective, I think it's with termination, like or supporting leaders in termination. Very rarely I've had leaders, when I say rarely, I'll say on two occasions, I've had leaders say of hundreds, thousands, so small, say, I want this person out. I don't care about anything. I want this person out. In my experience, leaders have really, the mindset and leadership capabilities have progressed so far, and people are very compassionate in leadership positions these days. But on those 2 occasions, I think what I thought was really important to flag with the leader, and they did actually approach it in the same way, that's someone's kid, someone's brother, someone's sister, someone's daughter, someone's mother,
Yeah.
father, whatever. And or it's you. And I mean, I believe in karma. What we put out comes back in some capacity. Or just be a good person. And so just doing the right thing can drive so many decisions. And I think that's also something that in having difficult conversations, if I use that as my foundation and I encourage and the leaders I work with do the same, or the people around, we're all in it doing the right thing, trying to do the right thing by each of
Yeah.
us, then there's synchronicity.
Yeah, I guess if our ships are sailing in the same direction, we're united, where I guess we have the same intentions. But just going back to some of these people that you've been part of a life changing conversation, it puts them in a very very difficult position whereby maybe they may not tell their partners about what's happened. They may choose what to tell them, what not to tell them. There could be a lot of shame, a lot of losing face. I think the male ego is a very real thing. I'm sure females have egos as well, but I guess stereotypically it's very, very big amongst males. And that's got to be really, really tough to try and challenge and navigate. So they walk out not feeling this small, but I guess they feel like walking out, you know what? There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe I'm capable of something a little bit more. Yes, this is a bigger pill to swallow, and this is a tough one. It's going to take me some time to get over this. However, we have a direction moving forward, and let's just pick up and just try and move into that direction.
Yeah, and something that's absolutely something I think you're spot on. I have worked in the APAC or APJ region a couple of roles, and I think I found it probably exacerbated that face in those circumstances came through a lot more predominantly, and it locally as well. I did have a leader locally that said he would not be able to go home and tell his family.
Mm,
But for me, how I've navigated through those difficult conversations is to just go talk to, like, that I'm here. You can talk to me, you can share. I mean, always as often in my experience as EAP, like employee assistance providers, I used them once at the encouragement of that leader that I had met, that director that I had mentioned when we had lost a dear friend. And at first I was like, oh, I'm not going to ring that. And I rocked up to work and he said, I think you need to go home and I think you should call these people. And I just found such value in talking to someone in that instance where I didn't see a face and I could just so I think EAP is a great service. And in the absence of that and this particular fellow picking up the phone and calling EAP or making an appointment, I offered to just be that person that he could share because obviously I knew what was happening. Because I think that's really important for people to have someone to talk to or share with, that they don't feel that they're burdening. And sometimes I think it's feeling like you're a burden on somebody, that prevents them being able to share, or feeling embarrassed, and the burden that we carry
yeah,
ourselves. I think what I would say is, I think what I would say for people, if people were to find themselves in situations like that and feeling like they were alone, perhaps, and you're right, like, well, not right. I think statistically there is kind of, men don't talk as much about their stuff. My son just had which was really great. The school brought some people into the school to talk about how they then had the boys together in a room, how young men might talk through problems and share and really encourage them to. It was for Are You Okay Day. Not everybody feels comfortable or has that skill, not the skill, has the ability, comfort to do that for various reasons. Hopefully that's a changing landscape. For men, I think women, again, statistically speaking, do tend to talk about their problems more so with each other. So there's a kind of counseling bit that comes from that interaction and engagement. But I would say, in the absence of being able to talk to somebody, write it out, or just get it out. Carrying those burdens on oneself, like whether it be like the frustration of a manager or a job, or feeling trapped, or feeling hugely responsible, or having job change or something change outside of your control. I just feel like the therapy of actually sharing it with something or someone is really valuable, and
yeah,
be kind to yourself. I think that would be the other thing, whatever form that takes. Surf, whatever, like a
yeah.
walk, a run, whatever.
I love the idea of being kind. I think it's something that we just don't do enough of, and I'll often sign off. If it's a podcast or like a YouTube video or maybe newsletter, I'll often sign off it as "Be kind to yourself. You're doing better than you think." I think
I like
these
that.
words, we need to hear these, and we honestly need to believe them as well. They're not just words on a page, or when you read them, they should not just be words on a page. It's the real deal, because this is the first time that we know we've done this before, right? Living, incarnating on Earth. This is, as we know, it's the first time we've done this, right? So there's no precedence. We're just giving it a crack. We're out there in the ether, just trying to figure stuff out. And I've always kind of thought that we're just trying to figure stuff out, and
Yeah.
we're just doing our best, right? So if you do your best and if you're turning up, because I think there is a large percentage of people who maybe just don't turn up every day, in my opinion or my observation. So if you can, at a bare minimum, get up, turn up every day and just do what you've got to do, I think it's almost like you're ahead of half the people out there already because you've turned up.
Yeah. I think you're spot on.
I have always a curious question. I like to ask people your values. What do you hold dear to Sarah? What is special that you hold dear to?
I've been doing a lot of work on my values lately, actually. So I think the timing of your question is ripe as. Um, and I love Brene Brown and like heaps of similar people to Brene Brown. And I went off her list of values. I believe you're supposed to get it down to two. I'm not being able to do that. So I have nine. One is optimism, joy, well-being, spirituality, kindness, peace, respect. It was 8 actually. So no, 9, fairness and freedom.
What if you had to get it down to 2?
Wow, that's tricky.
First 2 that maybe come to mind, maybe they're the ones, I don't know, but what would the 2
I'm
be?
gonna say optimism and kindness.
And what's behind that?
And what I notice is when I'm just making day-to-day decisions, moment to moment to moment to moment decisions, 2 things. If I'm kind to myself and others, then I'm really putting myself in a position that I'm being, close to best person I can be, or, should be doing pretty right things, I feel. And then sometimes things are outside of my control and I might just feel a little bit bummed, or I can get into a negative self-talk or negative headspace. And I don't even notice. I'm only noticing how self pity can play into my mind when I have so much to be grateful for, and I am. And that's where optimism, because, hang on a second. If optimism is a primary value, which it is for me, I want to look for the best. I want to believe that even if in this moment I don't feel like things are super fantastic as they might could be for me or somebody I care for or love, then I have to be optimistic and trust that it's going to be okay.
In the absence of evidence, right? I mean, it's almost like having faith. In the absence of evidence, you just have faith anyway, isn't it?
I don't think we ever have evidence of it. I feel because it's only retrospectively that we have the evidence of it, I feel. And that's where I think where the trust has to come into it so much.
Yeah. It's just, you said something which spurred on something. I saw a clip from a George Clooney movie from like probably 1999. I think it was called Three Kings. And he's talking about having courage. And he says to this guy, and I'm going to butcher it, right? But it's words effective. Courage looks like doing what you're scared to do um, to the nth, and then courage arrives once you've done it. So it actually
Oh,
goes in reverse. I've butchered it, right? And I'll send you the actual the video clip of it. But I guess moral to the story is you just do it first. You don't have the courage, but the courage arrives once you've done it. You go, yeah, I did have the courage to do that. Okay, that's cool. I was better than I thought.
yeah.
So I like that
Yeah.
one. Yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah,
love that.
yeah. It's cool. I'll
Yeah.
send it to you. So we're drawing very, very close to the end. I have one final question. What's your piece of advice to someone who they're in an organization, they've got some goals and objectives, they want to maybe they want to climb the ladder, or they want to be what they think they could be, reach their potential. How do they go about development?
Yeah. Front and center of mind for me is the networking, I think. I know that's I'd say it's like an all encompassing piece to that. So I would say networking, it's vitally important. And if people aren't doing it already, start doing it. Even one person every 3, 4, 5 months, particularly and especially because we live in a world where there is so much change in the work landscape. So I think it's just could not express how important I think that is. That put it to development plan, contact somebody, um, or identify a number of people, say 5, that you will contact over the course of a year, perhaps, or whatever is within reach, number 1. Number 2, I would say just give yourself a little bit of stretch, a little bit. See how you feel about it, but things that make you feel uncomfortable, find an environment that can be safe within work, a leader or peer, or just something to get involved in a little bit more of and stretch yourself. Just because, again, if we're not stuck, if we're doing the same role over and over and over again, again, there's change and our roles need to evolve and our JDs never stay the same from one day that they're written to a week later. So for that reason, I think just constantly being mindful of and stretching oneself and evolving in one's role is really valuable. I'm going to just say 4. The third thing I would say is if you don't have a good relationship with your manager, do what you can to enhance it. I think that relationship is really important because they do, and be open with that manager around what you're ultimately seeking. 'Cause leaders represent the champions for people in their roles. I just don't, and to that extent, visibility may not come to people depending on size of organization. The leader can be a real advocate and sponsor and champion, not even necessarily for roles, but to put someone forward for projects and stuff because they know what this person wants.
Yeah.
And I would say have a development plan. Definitely have one for whatever year performance review you're currently in. And I'm saying that because it's not always exactly the current year, but every framework is different. But I would say have a development plan keep it small, have like 2 things even to make it manageable in addition to your KPIs. Ideally, that are gonna generate value for the business and yourself, and keep it at the forefront of your conversations. Always ensure that that is touched on once a quarter with your leader.
Yep. Yep. It sounds like fantastic advice. Really, really, really does. Saira, thank you very much for being on Impact Influence. I hope you enjoyed it. I think I know our viewers and our listeners will get a lot from what you said today. Thank you very much. Thank you. If today's episode gave you a new way to think about emotional control, leadership, or how to build stronger relationships, take a second to share with a friend, teammate who'd value the same message. Big thanks goes to Saira Lusby for her insight and openness. Such an important reminder that real leadership starts with managing ourselves first. If you haven't already, hit subscribe and check out more episodes of Impact Influence, where we explore the mindsets and communication skills that helps you create more connection, confidence, and impact, both in business and in life. Take care and catch you on the next vid.